Something unprecedented just happened in Moscow. Yesterday, Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, met with Vladimir Putin, while Chinese Foreign Minister Wang met with his Russian counterpart. Three nuclear superpowers converged in overlapping meetings, and London is in absolute panic mode because these three nations together have the power to end British imperial control once and for all, and Donald Trump knows it. Not only is he building new alliances with the other superpowers, he's targeting the very lifeblood of the British Empire, drug money flows. But that's not what you'll hear from the mainstream media or from all too many influencers in MAGA world who are still drinking Britain's geopolitical poison that says Russia or China or both will forever be our adversaries, and that we must tie ourselves forever to NATO and Europe and Ukraine and the US-UK special relationship. While that's what they're still peddling to try to disorient the MAGA movement, the Anglo-American elites themselves know better. They know that the world is shifting away from them. And the establishment's Wall Street Journal has recently been sounding the alarm, as these two headlines show. The first one says, Trump's push to end the Ukraine war is sowing fresh fear about NATO's future. And the second one, Europe fears it can't catch up in great power competition. Now, RT gleefully covered that second Wall Street Journal article, highlighting the point with this quote: US, Russia, and China enhance their economic, technological, and military dominance while Europe stays behind. I'm Susan Kokinda, and since the 1970s, I've looked at how the British game masters have played the modern version of their imperial great game, keeping the superpowers pitted against each other in perpetual conflict. All the while, the global elites continue their control over the world and over nations' economies. And I've documented how the second Trump presidency is challenging that in unprecedented ways. So if this is your kind of fight, please hit the like and share buttons and subscribe to our channel. This is what I'll cover today. First, how Trump's world of sovereign nations is emerging, and why the British and the Europeans are still threatening war to stop it. Second, that the target in Venezuela is dirty money flows, not just drugs and not just Maduro. And third, how Trump's cabinet meeting shows the economic alternative. So was it coincidence that Trump's team of Witkoff and Kushner were in Moscow at the same time as China's Wang Yi? Whatever it was, the strategic optics are striking, and they reflect the new reality in the world. Think about what this represents. Since the end of World War II, British imperial strategy has depended on one fundamental principle: keep the superpowers fighting each other. The Cold War, Russia-China tensions, the US versus Red China. As long as the geopoliticians can use the United States as their dumb giant, acting in their interests, not in ours, they could keep it up. Well, Marco Rubio made clear yesterday in the cabinet meeting that that world is over.
It's also an honor to be involved in and be a witness to what I believe is the most transformational year in American foreign policy since the end of the Second World War, at least. And it's transformational because for the first time in a long time, we have a president who basically puts America at the forefront of every decision we make in our relations with the world. And that may sound weird to people, like, of course you always do. No, that hasn't always been the case until about a year ago. And I think we've all witnessed in our own respective spaces how in every interaction the president has with the world, the goal he has in mind is very simple. Does what you want us to do, or is it what we're going, or is it going to make us stronger? Is it going to make us richer? Is it going to make us safer? If it is, he's for it. If it's not, he's against it.
That's why Trump's approach to Russia and China is completely different than what has come before. Trump treats Russia as a nation with legitimate concerns, and that's why the Ukraine negotiations are actually moving forward. Similarly with China, last week's Trump-Xi phone discussion and the upcoming summits represent something the British establishment fears more than anything: direct dialogue between sovereign nations outside of their rules-based liberal free trade order. Their great game isn't working anymore, and Europe and Britain are being left out in the cold and are becoming irrelevant. Their response? Try to sabotage the peace process to continue and escalate the war. At a recent Council on Foreign Relations webinar on Ukraine, Liana Fix, their senior fellow on Europe, who, big surprise, studied at the London School of Economics, laid out what she called the playbook to sabotage the peace negotiations. And then she said,
something will build up that resembles actual pressure on Russia, and perhaps over the course of the next year will make Russia's position worse, so that they are not so confident that they can get the upper hand and come through with maximalist demands in the negotiation process. I think that's a European game plan. It does not really include the hope that a fair solution in negotiations might be found. From their perspective, this is more or less just performative politics that they have to push back against, that they have to adapt, and then to try to focus on what is really important, which is to keep Ukraine in the fight and to make sure that Russia's position worsens over time.
But it goes beyond keeping the Ukrainians fighting. The head of NATO's military committee, Admiral Dragon, took it to another level when he said NATO was considering preemptive action against Russia. And retired British General Sir Richard Sheriff, a former top NATO commander who says that Trump is under Putin's influence, declared that war with Russia is inevitable. But here's the reality that these warmongers don't want to face. They have as few cards left to play as does Zelensky. Zelensky has been boxed in by U.S.-directed corruption scandals, and the Europeans, well, they've gutted their economies with green policies, open immigration, and free trade. And the Europeans themselves are likely to be caught up in Ukrainian corruption scandals. So the balance of power is indeed shifting to the United States, Russia, and China, and their cooperation around real physical economic activity. This will leave the banker-run economies of the world behind, and that terrifies the city of London more than anything. So, while the empire wants to keep the war in Europe going, they certainly don't want Trump to take on the real enemy in this hemisphere. Or as J.D. Vance said in a post, "We've been told for decades the U.S. military must go everywhere and do the impossible all over the world. But the red line for permanent Washington is using the military to destroy narco-terrorists in our own hemisphere." So let's look at the backstory of the firestorm over Venezuela and why Pete Hegseth is in the crosshairs. This is where it gets really interesting, because this is where Trump is striking at the financial jugular of the British Empire. The main financial weapons of the British Empire have been severalfold. The obvious side is the official side: central banks, their grip on money flows through institutions like the Bank of England, the Bank for International Settlements, the other central banks. But the underside of this is the trillions of dollars of dirty money that are tied to drug trafficking and other illegal activity. Now, this relationship between the British Empire, the global financial system, and international drug trafficking and terrorism is something that researchers at Promethean Action have exposed for decades. So if you want to understand how the enemy really operates, subscribe to Promethean Action's free newsletter, and you'll get the strategic intelligence you need to win this fight. But here's the short version. The City of London and its dependencies in the Caribbean, like the Cayman Islands, have kept major banks afloat in the world through the protection of the drug trade and its vast financial flows going all the way back to the 1970s. We've never had a successful war on drugs because, quite literally, Wall Street and the City of London didn't want one. Let's go back to 1999 when Richard Grasso, the head of the New York Stock Exchange, went to Colombia and met with the finance chief of the FARC narco-terrorist gang. Grasso praised the financial sophistication of the commander and said that he hoped the meeting would mark the beginning of a new relationship between the FARC and the United States. What was that relationship? The dirty money that flows through the banking system and provides essential liquidity, especially during times of crisis. When you look at Venezuela, you're looking at a key linchpin in this financial and political nexus. How did it come to play that role? Thank the British. Maduro's predecessor and mentor, Hugo Chavez, modeled himself on guess who? Britain's Tony Blair. Right before his 1998 election to the Venezuelan presidency, Chavez said, "Over the last few years, I've been revising my positions, and I'm very close to the thesis of British Prime Minister Tony Blair when he speaks of the third way." And throughout his rise to power, Chavez was groomed by British diplomats in Venezuela and lauded by the British press. Maduro is carrying on in that tradition. Venezuela isn't just another socialist dictatorship. It's a node in a network of drug trafficking, money laundering, and financial flows that sustains not just the Maduro regime, but a significant portion of the offshore banking system that the British Empire depends on. And that's what Trump has targeted. That's the real reason for the hysteria over Hegseth. That's why the British have cut off intelligence sharing over Venezuela, not because they care about Maduro or Venezuelan democracy, but because Trump is targeting the money. Think about the carrier strike group, the USS Gerald Ford in the Caribbean. Is it only there because of its firepower? Think about the enormous electronic surveillance capacity that that carrier group has. Every time we strike a drug boat, you can bet the lines of encrypted communications light up between the traffickers and their higher-ups. Guess who's tracing that and putting together a detailed picture of the entire apparatus? Now, Scott Bessent, Trump's Treasury Secretary, said something really revealing recently. Listen to how he answers this question.
What's been the most surprising thing you've learned as Treasury Secretary about the job that you weren't expecting?
The national security aspect. So I would say that I spend 40 or 50% of my time on national security.
Think about that. Why is the Treasury Secretary spending 40 to 50% of his time on national security? Because national security and financial security are inseparable. Because the financial weapons are the real weapons of empire. When Trump goes after Venezuela, he's not really going after a government. He's going after the financial structure that keeps the British imperial system functioning. But if you're going to take on that imperial financialized free trade system, what do you replace it with? We'll go back to Scott Bessent again when he was asked about our vulnerabilities because of free trade.
We can't stay dependent on China. Is the administration moving to move us away from rare earth dependence to rare earth independence?
What you are saying, John, is we are taking back our sovereignty, and that it's inexcusable. And again, this is back to like this unfettered free trade idea. The technology, especially in rare earth magnets that's being used against us, it was U.S. technology.
Taking back our economic sovereignty. What does that look like? Well, look at yesterday's cabinet meeting. You'll see a team of people working with each other, committed to getting things done in the real world of the physical economy, not the world run by financial parasites. Howard Lutnick put it this way: we set out to stop the ripoff of the United States. This is about global change of trade. And he focused on reshoring manufacturing, and he talked about the capital flowing into productive capacity and building key sectors like nuclear energy and shipbuilding. The White House has a new portal where you can track the enormous investments now pouring into the United States, whitehouse.gov/investment. Keep your eye on that. And this is a whole of government approach. I met with a representative of small businessmen in the Detroit area yesterday, and they said one of their biggest problems is the lack of skilled labor. The Trump administration knows this. Here's what Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer said yesterday.
So the Labor Department has wasted no time in putting that into action with our Make America Skilled Again, either grant dollars, but the intentionality of the apprenticeship program, 1 million active apprentices across this country. We have done over 250,000 new apprentices so far in the first year and registered over 2,000 new apprenticeship programs. Why do we need the apprenticeship programs with the men and women in the trades? Because of the leadership of onshoring and reshoring, and have a lot of these companies reinvest in America. We have to build this country. We cannot do that without the tradesmen and women and the craftsmen of this country. And I think that, Howard and I, we talked about that from the beginning, and we're going to have to lean in on that because we need the labor force, 700,000 new skilled jobs with electricians, construction workers, machinists, and so forth.
I want you to listen to the entire cabinet meeting. Rather than just sitting there and doom scrolling, pay attention to what Trump is actually doing. You will see the American system of political economy being reborn before your eyes. Promethean Action has been in the forefront of advocating for that economic revolution, and we're building a movement of people who can join with President Trump in bringing it into being. If you want to be a part of that, become a paying member of or a contributor to our growing community. So let's take it back to where we started. This is where the diplomatic convergence in Moscow comes back in. This wasn't just diplomats making separate deals, but three superpowers with the productive capacity to end 300 years of British imperial control. The Venezuelan strikes can cut off their dirty money, and the cabinet's economic vision builds the alternative. The Anglo-American establishment knows their time is up, as long as you stay focused and support what Trump and his team are doing. So this has been your midweek update.